Stroudner, who is going to do a whirlwind introduction to PSF DAO. For those of you not familiar, Chris is a community member that has really risen to the top in terms of his interest and availability, and we're really grateful to have him here for our first community demos.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, really appreciate it. There's a lot of synergy, which is why I wanted to share, which I am attempting to do right now. Okay, you guys can see my screen? Take that as a yes.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. I'm trying to find my unmute button again.
Yeah, no sweat. Okay, so this is just a whirlwind introduction to the Permissinless Software Foundation. I'm going to try and keep this in around 15 minutes. The focus of this presentation is just to highlight some of the similarities in the tech stacks between Unchained and what the Permissionless Software Foundation's been developing, and just pique interest in some of these PSF initiatives and explore some of the token trading synergy between our two DAOs. So I recommend that everybody hit their print screen button right now. I also put this link in the staged chat. This will take you to a gist with a bunch of links. So I'm going to go through things really quickly, but if you want to dig into any one particular thing I cover, there's lots of links there, and I'm going to be speaking to those notes even though I'm showing the slides. So the Permissionless Software Foundation, our mission is to make it easy for individuals to protect their privacy, circumvent censorship, and engage in economic activity. So our mission is very much in line with the philosophical leanings of ShapeShift. So that's one good way in which we mesh and have potential for synergy. The DAO is very small. We're about 6 to 12 active JavaScript developers and growing. Plus we have a supportive community of non-devs. And we employ 2 developers in Venezuela, one full-time and one part-time. They've been great. I work with them primarily directly to direct them. And they do a lot of our day-to-day development, keep the ball rolling. And then the community devs sort of jump in where they can and where they're of interest, and mostly for bounties and grants and stuff like that. So we're cross-chain. We're open to any blockchain, but particularly we tend to focus on Avalanche, which, just to bring people up to speed on that, it's a blockchain of blockchains. They have 3 primary chain. They're X chain, which is UTXO based and is similar to Bitcoin. They have a C chain, which is EVM compatible, and they have a bridge to Ethereum, and then they have a P chain, which isn't fully developed yet. And so it's interesting, they have tokens on both the X chain and the C chain, and a native way to move tokens between the 2 chains. They have a DEX on their C chain, and they have Sherpa Cash, just launched yesterday, which is a privacy using zero knowledge proofs to basically obfuscate your Avalanche. You can sort of wash it, and then a lot of us come from the Bitcoin Cash space, which, just to bring you guys up to speed on that, I mean, it's basically just Bitcoin with bigger blocks and lower fees. It's UTXO based, obviously. We have tokens that includes fungible and NFT tokens, and we have a new side chain called Smart BCH, which is EVM compatible. And someone just recently launched the first DEX on that, and so that ecosystem is growing rapidly. And I mention these because these are all opportunities for ShapeShift to make money with trading. And then finally, I'll mention eCash, which forked off from Bitcoin Cash last November. It's the ABC development team, which was the lead implementation of Bitcoin Cash since the beginning. They're the ones that forked off and created eCash, and they are also working on an EVM. So again, another potential there for trading. So we are also developing our own DEX, and it has 3 main components to it. The swap protocol is a trustless, allows trustless atomic trading of tokens, and this works both on the Avalanche X chain, or the three chains that I mentioned, and this is really the core of it. So I'm going to just spend a minute kind of talking about this. In the notes, I have an example of sort of the three-step process that's involved in one of these trustless atomic trades, where say you have Alice and Bob. Alice has a token she wants to sell. Bob wants to buy the token. Alice will create a partially signed transaction with the token she wants to sell as an input and the amount of Bitcoin Cash or Avalanche she wants to be paid as the output, and she'll sort of submit that into an order book, and then Bob will browse that order book and find the order that he wants to find. He'll add an input that's the amount that Alice wants to receive, and he'll add an output, which is his address to receive the token, and he'll sign his input and output, and then he'll submit the partially signed transaction back to Alice. Alice checks the transaction to make sure that Bob hasn't messed with it in any way. She can't change his input and outputs because they're signed, and she signs her input and broadcasts the transaction. And in this way, the trade is both trustless and atomic. Neither party has the opportunity to sort of game the other. And there's a great video introduction to this process that I just very briefly went over, as well as code examples for anybody who wants to dig into that. So kind of a big deal in my mind to do these trustless atomic trades for tokens, and the fact that they work on most UTXO chains, this scheme. So the other big ingredient here is you need a place to store that trade data, and so we've developed the pay-to-write database, or P2WDB. And it's a database, but it's got blockchain-like properties. It works primarily on IPFS, but it's decentralized and distributed. Everyone has their own copy of the database, and the database is synced through consensus rules. And in order to write to the database, you have to burn a PSF token, and that's your ticket to writing to the database. So that would be essentially the database that lets this order book function. And then finally, there's this JSON RPC over IPFS. So this is a replacement for REST APIs, and I think this is of particular interest to ShapeShift because I know that you guys, I've heard a lot of the engineers talk about how you want to encourage and incentivize the community to run decentralized infrastructure and then find some way to combine all these disparate pieces of infrastructure into a coherent user experience. And I think the JSON RPC over IPFS is a potential there for that. So for anybody who's familiar with the REST API, that's basically how the web works today. But it's location-based addressing, and so it's easily censored by firewalls or domain seizures. And JSON RPC over IPFS was designed to essentially replace that functionality by sending the data over IPFS, which is content addressed rather than location addressed. So those same censorship techniques don't work against the content-based addressing. And so again, I'm just really briefly covering this, but I've got some additional notes at that link on GitHub that you guys can dig into, and videos. I think that's this JSON RPC over IPFS concept is something I'd really like to dig in with some of the other ShapeShift engineers over time, as it becomes more of a priority to explore this problem of how do you get different pieces of infrastructure sort of talking together and having a coherent user experience. The main shift here is, instead of having some one API server, which is typically how things are done, you have many redundant API servers on IPFS that a client simply needs to find one of them and connect to them in order to achieve, whatever they're trying to achieve, which in this case is typically a trade. So yeah, I kind of already covered this slide that Swap protocol uses collaborative transactions, and it works primarily for all UTXO chains. Let me just conclude briefly with this example of the stack. So on the left is the Unchained stack, and on the right is the cache stack that we have at fullstack.cache. And I didn't really get a chance to explain that. Fullstack.cache is essentially the commercial arm of the PSF. We sell blockchain services and managed hosting of infrastructure. And so when I saw the Unchained architecture, I immediately saw the pattern. I have these three pictures on the screen. I have them lined up sort of, if you look at that middle chunk where the API is, or the REST API, that's kind of how they line up. But then you can see they have the exact same architecture where you have a node at the bottom, an indexer above that, an API above that, and essentially that makes up your backend infrastructure. And then above that is your client side. You have some sort of interface library, and then the actual application that the user's using. And so it's a very good fit, and also your guys' choice to use Blockbook, that resonated with me because that was one of my earlier choices too. Blockbook was our go-to indexer for a while until we phased it out and replaced it with Fulcrum, which provides a lot of the same data. So this is one of the areas that I'm really excited about contributing to ShapeShift is just helping out with the BTC integration. And then once I understand and we've sort of got that box checked, then potentially take a lead or just help with other BTC fork integrations like Bitcoin Cash or eCash. There's smaller ones like Lotus and Fluence. All these ones have tokens. I'd love to add them. There's also the Avalanche chain, which is kind of a new animal, but uses a lot of the same techniques and a lot of the same tech still works on it. So I'd love to help with integrating that chain because I think that just went into the top 20. That's now a top 20 chain, and also there's some big networking difficulty or challenges ahead that ShapeShift needs to work through, and I have experience working with those issues and thinking about those issues. So I look forward to collaborating with ShapeShift on some of those. So right now, as I move forward, I've currently got a Bitcoin node synced, and today I will have Blockbook compiled and syncing to that node. So I'll have the base infrastructure I need to start contributing to the Bitcoin integration for Unchained. And Highlanders walked me through a bit of the Kubernetes and Pulumi setup. So those are new tools for me. So I'm learning how to navigate those. Let me go ahead and just bring up this QR code again so you guys can all take a picture of that. I'd love to explore these ideas at a deeper depth with anybody who wants to talk about them. I just didn't want to go too far down any one particular rabbit hole on this presentation. So hopefully I've piqued your interest, and please reach out to me. And one of the things, so just again to recap on the Permissinless Software Foundation, we have bi-weekly technical committee meetings every Wednesday. So our next one will be this same time next Wednesday. And we've discussed the ShapeShift quite a bit. One of the things we've discussed is maybe setting ourselves up to be a regular sort of a contractor DAO for the ShapeShift DAO. And so that's something I hope to explore as we go forward. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That was awesome, and certainly appreciate the enthusiasm and passion and the way you've stepped up here. I wanted to ask about so Jason RPC over IPFS. I'm curious about the performance there, and then also like ensuring the integrity of responses and data and such there.
That's a great question. Everything's in alpha right now, so it's working. It's definitely not on par with REST API. You couldn't expect to drop it in and have the same performance. It is bulkier and slower, I suppose, like if you were to compare it, but really it's the paradigm shift that is the hardest challenge. There is just sort of the whole HTTP protocol and REST API is so well understood, and there's such great tools for dealing with it that it sort of makes the JSON RPC over IPFS look bad by comparison. but the big strength there, so it really, in terms of performance, it's the REST API is definitely better. And that's sort of a given with the level of maturity of the JSON RPC over IPFS right now.
Sure.
But the thing that you got to keep in mind is, what kind of world are we going into in terms of regulators being more heavy-handed, and I think Eric has said in the past that like we're sort of in between the laughing phase and the fighting phase of the first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then you fight you, and then you win. And so I think that the next few years is really going to test the true decentralization of a lot of these projects. And I just see REST APIs, which is the way the internet works today, as a huge attack vector. And so I've the way that this started, the way that this whole idea started, is there was a woman in Venezuela who's a fan of our web wallet, and she was trying to get a woman in China to use it so that she could pay her. And she was not able to access it, but our front end does go over IPFS. And so she was able to access the front end over IPFS from mainland China. So that was a wonderful piece of data. And so the problem that's consumed me for the last year is how do you pipe back end infrastructure over IPFS so that you can get everything on IPFS if it's robust against firewalls like the Chinese firewall. So that's been sort of the canonical use case. And so I have high hopes. And like I said, it is working, but it is still early days. It needs a lot of work.
Yep. Yeah, I hear your message loud and clear on the censorship thing. That's one of the first things in my mind as well going forward here. So, yeah, definitely love to take you up on furthering the conversation around this with ShapeShift engineers.
Yeah, cheers.
Anyone else have questions for Chris? Going once, going twice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'll just stop sharing, and I just want to encourage anybody to DM me, and if you have other questions, want to explore some of this stuff, check out those notes. There's lots of videos and introductory videos, and we've got active bounties for setting up infrastructure around sort of this JSON RPC over IPFS. But I'm going to be exploring just setting up infrastructure with ShapeShift and really trying to explore the synergies there. So I'm open to anybody who wants to continue this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks again. That concludes our demos for today. I'd like to thank everyone again for attending. And we'll plan to do this again, same time, 2 weeks from today. So keep that in mind. If you have something you'd like to present or talk about it, that's a great time for it. Thank you, everyone.
Josh. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.